Alright guys, so as you probably guessed by the thumbnail and the title of this video, we're going to be taking a look at hamburger menus, and we're going to be taking a look at 4 different designs using just HTML and CSS. Now in regards to hamburger menus themselves, you've more than likely run into these before, mainly because most modern websites now, and especially in mobile design, will have a hamburger menu. And this is because they're really helpful in getting everything tucked away in smaller screen sizes, and are really useful in making your content more neat and tidy, and just gives it that nice modern look to it as well. So taking a look at our 4 examples here, the first one you can see has this effect where the 3 lines here will rotate and will form a cross. The second design here will have this effect where the middle bar will disappear and the top and the bottom bar will then rotate towards the center and create another cross. For the third design, you can see the cross will begin from the middle, whereas the top and the bottom bar disappear. And then finally, this is my favorite, we have this cool animation where the top and the bottom bar will animate towards the middle bar and then rotate to create the cross, and then if I click on it again, you see it animates to its original position. So those are the 4 different designs we're going to create in this video. So just quickly before we dive into the CSS and create our first hamburger menu example here, I just want to quickly go over the markup. So in our markup you can see we have a div with a class of grid container, and this is just going to house all of our hamburger menus, and it's also styled with CSS grid, hence why I've called it grid container. So inside that you can see we have the markup for our first hamburger menu, which has a div which has the class of grid boxes, which is just a general style, and then grid 1, and each of the hamburger menus will have their own respective number, and this is just to give them that individual background color. So inside of our div you can see we have the input and the label. So inside the input we have the type of checkbox, and this is actually really important for our hamburger menus here, because the checkbox, or the type of checkbox, has 2 states, and when we combine it with the label we can style both those 2 different states, which will give us our designs. Now, as well as the type of checkbox, we have the ID of checkbox 1, which is just linked to our label here with the for attribute. So this combines the input and the label together. Really important that you also do that. Now, as well as the type of checkbox, the ID of checkbox 1, we also have a couple classes in here. First being checkbox 1. Now, I know this is a little bit similar to the ID, but this has a little dash, and this is the class we're going to be using to actually style the check state. And just so it doesn't completely confuse you guys, I just used a dash here. Now I will show you guys why we have that class hidden in just a moment. Now for the label, again we have the for attribute which links it to the input. Now inside the labels you can see we have a div which has the class of hamburger, which is essentially our hamburger here, and they also have their own individual class, so it will range from 1 to 4. Now inside of this div you can see we have 3 divs, which are basically just the 3 bars that you see here, which have a general class of bar, and then each of the bars have their own individual class there, so from 1 all the way to 3. So that's it for our markup at the moment. Let's now open this up in live server and see what it looks like currently. So you can see here we just have our input, and you see its initial state right now is unchecked, so we can style this however we like. And then the second state is the check state, and again we can style this however we like as well. So what we're going to do first now is just head into the style sheet and just create some general styles. So the first thing I want to do is let's just remove all of the margin and the padding, set the box size in to border box, and then we're going to grab our grid container, and what I'm going to do is set this to a width of 100% and then a height, let's say 100 viewport height, so it's the whole height of the browser here. And then let's grab the display grid, and we're going to have a repeat function of 2 columns, and each of the columns is going to be 1 fractional unit. Now you're not going to see this effect just yet because we've only got 1 hamburger menu in there at the moment, but when we start including the others you're going to start seeing the effect. So the next thing I want to do is center our hamburger menus, so we do that with the grid boxes. So we're going to say display, we're going to use flexbox for this example, so justify content to the center, line items to the center, and we'll also set the position to relative. So what we're doing here with flexbox is essentially just centering all our hamburger menus inside of their boxes. So we've got that. The next thing I want to do is just give it a background color, so we're going to say grid 1, and we're going to have a background color of that purpley color. So this has a hex value of 8, 00080, and this is massive at the moment. Again, that's because we've only got one hamburger menu at the moment, and because in our grid template columns we've included 2 columns, this is why it's currently right now only half of the browser. So now the next thing we're going to do is just style our hamburger here, so the div which has the class of hamburger. So what we're going to do is go underneath here, and we're going to grab the hamburger class, and we're going to give this a width of, let's say, 30 pixels, a height of 30 pixels, and then a position relative for the hamburger, because we want all of the divs which have the class of bar to be position absolute inside of our hamburger there. So the next thing we'll do is grab those divs with the class of bar. So we'll say hamburger bar, and we'll position this absolute. We'll give this a width of 30 pixels, so it's the same length as our burger there, and then a height of, say, about 4 pixels. Background color, let's say FFF, so you can see one of the lines there. We'll also set the display to block, and then we want this to be smooth, so we're going to put a transition, so we'll say transition all, about 0.4 seconds, ease in, out. The next thing I want to do now is just use the top and bottom properties for our position absolute here, so we can see the other bars there. So we're going to do the first one for bar 1, and this will stay at the top, so we're just going to say top 0, and then I'll just duplicate this a couple more times, so for 2 and 3. So for bar 2 we want to push this down, so about 12.5 pixels, and then for bar 3 from the bottom I want this to be 0. So you can see our hamburger menu there now. Now the next thing I want to do is hide our input here. So this is when that class of hidden can come into effect. So what I'll do actually is just put this above hamburger here, and we'll grab the hidden class, and then what we want to do is position this as well absolute, so it's centered in our hamburger menu there. And then we want to change, let's actually give it the height of 30 pixels, width of 30 pixels, and then let's and then what we're going to do is hide this, so we'll use the visibility property and we'll set this to hidden. So now we physically can't see it, but the checkbox is there. Now what I also forgot to do is actually just make the edges of our bars here more rounded, so we'll do that with the border radius property. So I'll grab border radius, we'll do about 4 pixels, which I think looks a little bit better in my opinion. So now we have our 3 bars here. The first thing we're going to want to do is grab that check state, and the way we do that is we're just going to use the class here of checkbox 1, which is the input. So we'll just type in under this comment checkbox 1, and then to grab the check state use a colon and then type in checked. And then what we want to do from here is also combine the check state with our label. So to do that we're going to need the plus symbol selector. So grab the plus symbol selector and we'll put in here label. And again, what this does now is just combine the 2 elements which have the same parent, which in this case the parent being the div with the class of grid boxes, which is the parent to the input and the label there. So again, what we've done now is just combine the label and the check state together. Now it's really important to remember here that the second element, i.e. the label here, comes immediately after the first element, which is the input, otherwise this wouldn't work. Now after our label here, the next thing we need to do is go inside our label here and grab the direct children of the label element. To do that we're going to need the angle bracket, and then what we're going to do is grab hamburger 1, or the class of hamburger 1, which is the div which wraps around the 3 bars there. And then what we need to do is use the angle bracket again to target our first bar so we can style it. So we'll use the angle bracket again and then grab bar 1. So we're grabbing the check state here, we're combining it with the label using the plus symbol selector. Again, really important that when you're using this symbol, the element comes immediately after the first element, and then we're using the angle bracket to target the direct children of that particular element, which in this case is hamburger 1, and then we're using the angle bracket again to then target our first bar, and this is now ready for styling. So in regards to styling of the bar 1 here, if we take a look at our draft example here, you can see if we take a look at the first bar here and we click on this, you can see it rotates to a certain degree. The width of the first bar does actually appear to shrink down. However, the height of the bar, if you take a close look, actually increases. So to achieve this design for our first bar here, we're going to use the transform property as well as the height property. So we'll head back into our example there. So we'll head back into what we're working on here and we'll go inside the bar 1. So we'll grab the transform property and then we're going to rotate this by 45 degrees, and then we're going to grab the scale on the x-axis and shrink this down to 0.6. And if you take a look at the browser now, this is exactly what's happening to our first bar. It's rotating 45 degrees, and on the x-axis it's shrinking down to about almost half of the size. Now again, what we also want to do is make the height when it rotates or transforms here to be a bit bigger, so we'll say by about an extra pixel, and that's all we're really going to need for the styling for the bar 1. Now of course this doesn't look exactly the same as our original here, because you can see that the transform effect actually doesn't start in the center of the bar. So what I mean by this is that when we're using the transform property here, by default the values we set inside of this property are always going to originate from the middle of whichever element we're applying it to, in this case bar 1, which makes sense because when I click on this you can see it's actually rotating on its current position and the scale on the x-axis is shrinking evenly. Now if we want the values of the transform property here to originate somewhere else on the bar, we can use the transform origin property to do this. So what I'm going to do is just go above this styling here, and I'm just going to grab hamburger 1 and then I'm going to grab bar 1, and then what we can do is grab transform origin, and let's say instead of the middle or 50%, which it is by default, we want it to originate from 80% of the bar, which would be on the right side. So I'll just bring this line back to its original position. 80% would be somewhere around here, so I'm going to put in here 80%, and then if I click on this now, you can see now it's originating from that 80% instead of the middle. So you can actually visually see how transform origin works in this example. So if we take a look back to our original example here, you can see that we want the origin to be around 10%, so more to the left side. So let's just change this to 10%. So you can see if I click on this now, the bar is rotating and scaling down in size exactly where we want it to. So all we need to do from here now is just style the rest of the bars. So what I want to do is just duplicate this 2 more times. So we have bar 2, bar 3, and then I'll just uncheck this so we don't get confused by all of this rotating and scaling. Now for the second bar, if we take a look at our example in the draft, it's rotating 45 degrees but rotating the other side, and it's also actually scaling up in size. So what we need to do is go to bar 2, we're going to put in here negative 45 degrees, and let's scale it up to, let's say 1.3. So if I click on this now, you can see that it's rotating exactly where we want it and it's scaling to the right size. Now all we need to do for bar 3 is the same thing we did for bar 1 and just change its transform origin. So duplicate this, grab bar 3, and instead of 10% we want it to be, let's say 90%, so the exact opposite position. So if I click on the bar now, you can see it's rotating and scaling down in size exactly where we want it to, and it just looks exactly the same as our draft example here. And as you can see, it's pretty simple to create this. All we've needed really is the transform property with rotated scale, and then transform origin, change the origin of the transform, and then utilize the 2 states of checked and unchecked to create this hamburger menu effect. And we're going to be using this technique now for the rest of our menus. So let's head back into HTML here and create our second example, which is this example here. So the second design here has this effect where the middle bar will disappear and the top and bottom bars will then rotate towards the center, creating another cross. It's another pretty cool design. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this to give us another hamburger menu, and then just change a few things. So grid 2, checkbox 2, checkbox 2 again, 4, checkbox 2, and then hamburger 2. And then for this hamburger menu we're actually going to need a few more bars, so we'll just duplicate that, bar 4, bar 5, and then head into the browser there. And then the first thing I want to do is just change the background color. So we'll grab grid 2, and this has a hexadecimal value to FF6600. So it has that orange background color and also our hamburger menu there. So the next thing I want to do is, because we've got an extra bar here, I want to grab bar 4 and also stick it to the bottom. So put bottom 0, and then go to the bottom here and type in hamburger menu 2. And again, we're going to be using the same technique as we did in the previous example. So the first thing we want to do is grab that check state for the second hamburger menu. So we'll say checkbox, instead of 1, have 2, and then that check state plus the label, angle bracket, hamburger 2, angle bracket again, grab bar 1, and then for bar 1 what we want to do is grab the transform property again. We're going to rotate this 45 degrees and then scale on the x-axis. We'll shrink it to 0.7, and then the height, again, we want to raise it by a pixel. So that's what it currently looks like at the moment. Now we'll duplicate this actually a few more times. So for bar 2 we want this to disappear, so we're going to set the opacity to 0, and then for bar 3 we'll just keep this the same, and then again duplicate this 2 more times for bar 4 and 5. 5, and then instead of positive 45 degrees we'll do negative 45 degrees for these two. And if you take a look at the design, it's actually created 2 X's already, and it looks pretty cool actually if you just click on this. But what we need to do now is just change the transform origin for the bars. So I'll go above all of these and then grab hamburger 2, let's grab bar 1, transform origin, we want it to be 10%, and then we'll just duplicate this for bar 3, 4 and 5. So for bar 3 we want 90%, for bar 4 we'll keep it at 10, and then for bar 5 we'll also have it at 90%. So that should be it for our second hamburger menu design now, and as you can see this is working the exact same as our draft example. So we can now move on to the third design, which is where the cross actually begins in the middle bar, and then the top and bottom bar will disappear. Kind of similar to our second example there, but instead of the top and bottom bar making the X, the middle bar is. So again, another pretty cool design. So we'll head back into our browser there, and then just go to our index.html, and then just duplicate this again, and then just change a few things here. So grid 3, checkbox 3, and then hamburger 2. And for this menu we're only going to need 4 bars. So we'll go to the style sheet again, just change the background color to another hexadecimal value, so FFBF00, and we'll change it for grid 3. So there's our third hamburger menu there. So we'll go underneath hamburger 2, put a comment for hamburger, put a comment for hamburger menu 3, and for this one we'll grab that check state. So instead of checkbox 3, then plus the label, angle bracket again, hamburger 3, angle bracket, bar 1, and then so for bar 1 we want the top bar to disappear, so what we're going to do is grab the transform property, scale 0, duplicate this a few more times, so for bar 4 we want the scale to be 0 as well, and then for bar 2 here what we want to do is rotate this by 45 degrees. Let's also scale this up in size a little bit, so 1.3, and then give this a height of 5 pixels, oh, not 50, 5 pixels, and then let's see what it looks like at the moment. So that's looking good. And then for the third bar, because we've already given this a bottom of 0 for this example, we're just gonna create a third bar here, or a different third bar, so we'll just use a dash. So we'll go underneath all of these here and we'll just put in bar 3, so with a dash, and then we want to say from the bottom we want to push this up 12.5 pixels so it's in the center, and then we'll go back down to bar 3 here, and then for transform we want this to rotate negative 45 degrees, scale up in size again, and then we'll just give this a height of 5 pixels as well. So if I click on this hamburger menu now, the top and bottom bar should disappear, and then the middle 2 bars here should create that X. So as you can see, it's working exactly the same as our draft example here, so it looks pretty good. Now we'll move on to the final design now, which, as I mentioned earlier in the video, is actually my favorite design. So if we take a look at the finished example, we can see that if I click on this, we get this really cool animation where the top and bottom bar will animate towards the middle bar, and then it will rotate to create that cross, and then if I click on it again, it animates to its original position. So we'll head back into our draft example, and then we're going to need to duplicate this one more time to create that last hamburger menu, and then just change all of these to 4, and then we're only going to need 3 bars for this example, and we'll just change this to bar 3. So let's head into the style sheet now, and let's first give it a blue background. So yes, that blue background there. So we can just duplicate this, and this has a hex value of 003366. Oh. So there's the background color for our design there. So let's head back down now to the bottom, and I'm just going to create a comment for hamburger 4, and then let's use that technique again of grabbing the check state and combining it with the label. So we want to grab checkbox 4 of that check state, combine it with the label, angle bracket so we can get to the hamburger 4, angle bracket again so we can get to bar 1. So when this is clicked, we want it to push down from the top by about 13.5 pixels, so it'll be in the middle, and then when it reaches that center point, we want this to transform, rotate 45 degrees so it creates that cross, and then also want this to actually scale up in size, so let's say 1.3, and then let's duplicate this 2 more times, bar 2, bar 3. So for bar 2, we just really want this to disappear, so we can just say scale 0. So when we click on this, we pretty much, we want this to disappear. And then for bar 3, instead of the top, we want this to push from the bottom. So we'll say bottom 13.5 pixels, so it meets the top, so it meets the first bar here in the middle. And then to create that cross, we just need to put this as a negative value. So if I actually click on this design now, you can see it actually creates a pretty cool design by itself, just by using the values we created here. But again, I want this to be more animated, so what we're going to do is go above all of the check states here, and I'm going to grab hamburger 4, then grab the bars, and then we're just going to use a transition here. So transition all about 0.4 seconds, and then ease in out, and then we also want to grab the transforms, and we'll do this about 0.5 seconds, ease in out, and then also add a bit of a delay here too with this transition there. So if I click on this now, it should be the exact same as our finished example. So as you can see, it's animating just the way it does in our original example there. So that's how we can create our 4 different hamburger menu designs. So to create these, we'll utilize the 2 states of the type of checkbox in the input, combine it with the label, and then utilize the transform property along with transform origin and transitions to create these different designs. Now I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give the video a like, and if you're new here, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video.